Did you want to do this? At some point, did he do some other things to you?
Yes.
Hey y'all, welcome back to Ramblin' Mama. I'm Lisa. As you can see by the length of this video, it's a doozy. And not just in length, but in terms of disturbing content. It includes mention of every kind of abuse you can imagine done by close family members. So if any of that is triggering to you, please click off now. A friendly reminder that I am not an expert. This is just based on my research and the research of Molly Robichaux. Thank you again, Molly, for all your hard work. And if you're new here, I love doing deep dives on true crime. So if that's your kind of thing, please consider subscribing. This trial is very unique in the sense that it was televised from start to finish, the first trial. So there is so much content out there, and I struggled to not include all of it. I'm not gonna do a lot of talking in this episode. I wanted to give you clips from the trial that I thought were representative of it. So in this first video, I couldn't even fit all of trial 1 into it, but we're gonna take a look at the opening arguments as well as some of the witnesses from the prosecution, and we're gonna end with Lyle's testimony. And in the next video, I'm gonna start with Eric's testimony and then get into trial 2. I know it's a weird way to split things up, but here we are. I'm gonna reserve my overall thoughts about this case until the last video in the series, whenever that's going to be. But I wanna ask you, as you go through this video today, please let me know in the comments down below what you think about these various witnesses. All right, let's get into it.
In 1993, the court summoned over 1,000 people for jury duty. It had been ruled earlier that the brothers would be tried separately. Lyle's jury consisted of 7 men and 5 women, and Eric's had 8 men and 4 women. The average age of the jurors was in their mid-40s. The defense told the court during a pre-trial hearing that they planned to admit Lyle and Eric murdered their parents. However, they held their strategy close to the vest and didn't reveal much else. Soon it came out that the brothers' defense attorneys, Leslie Abramson and Jill Lansing, planned to present evidence that Lyle and Eric were victims of child abuse at the hands of their father, Jose. At the brothers' arraignment in 1990, they appeared tan, cocky, and carefree. However, just a few short years later, in 1993, they had changed dramatically. They both lost weight, and Eric appeared gaunt and pale. Some members of Jose's family supported Lyle and Eric, but there were no members of Kitty's family present at the trial.
So it's very important that you not have any exposure to any material in the news coverage, whether it's in the newspapers, magazines, TV, or radio. At this point, the lawyers will be making opening statements to the jury, and let me just remind you that opening statements are not evidence. They are merely the lawyer's opportunity to give you a preview of what the evidence will be during the course of the trial. The lawyers are not witnesses. They don't have any firsthand knowledge of the events. All they can do is give you their preview of what they expect the evidence to be, and you won't hear any evidence until after opening statements when the witnesses start testifying. Going back one moment to another matter that I wanted to mention to you, I've talked about primarily the print media in my remarks about news coverage, And there's also television news coverage about this case and radio news coverage about the case. And it's very important that you not look at or listen to any of that. There will be, throughout the trial, a television camera in the courtroom. It's not a camera that is going to focus on you in any way. The rules are that the camera cannot focus on the jurors and cannot photograph the jurors. There will be a still photographer occasionally in the courtroom. Again, the rules are he cannot photograph the jurors, so you don't have to be concerned that you will ever be photographed during the course of these proceedings. It's just another way that the public has access to the proceedings, that we have these additional apparatus in the courtroom, and it should not in any way influence you in how you go about your job. Your job is to concentrate on the evidence as it's being presented during the course of the trial. All right, then, I'll now turn to the lawyers, and they may make their opening statements. First, the prosecution makes an opening statement, and then the defense.
On July 20th, 1993, the opening arguments began, and Pamela Bozanich laid out the case against Lyle. She detailed the horrific murders of Jose and Kitty and reminded the jury that if Lyle could have lied to the police about his parents' murder, he could have lied about any abuse he allegedly was subjected to by his parents.
I'm going to repeat exactly what the judge just told you because it's an important legal concept. What I'm going to outline here in the next 20 minutes to half an hour is an overview of what the people anticipate the evidence will show. But what I'm going to tell you is not evidence. It's merely an aid so that when you hear the evidence as we present it, you have some sort of context into which to place it so it doesn't come to you in a vacuum. And this is what the people believe the evidence will show. On August the 20th of 1989, at approximately 11:47 p.m., Beverly Hills Police Dispatcher Christina Nye received a 911 call at the police station. On the line was Lyle Menendez, who sounded hysterical, reporting that, quote, "someone shot my mom and my dad," end quote. You will hear that 911 tape, and you will hear the emotion manifested in that phone call. Police officers from the Beverly Hills Police Department arrived at the scene, 722 North Elm Drive, in under 5 minutes. Police Officer Michael Butkus and Sergeant Kirk West, both of the Beverly Hills Police Department, will testify in this case. Officer Butkus arrived at the scene first. He approached the house, and shortly thereafter, he heard screaming as the two defendants, Eric Menendez and Lyle Menendez, came running out the front door. Officer Butkus will describe the demeanor of the defendants that night in their first contact with the police. Sergeant West was one of the last units to arrive at the scene in response to the initial radio dispatch. Sergeant West and other officers entered the house to determine what had happened and to determine if the killers were still inside of the house. Sergeant West will describe his discovery of the bodies of Jose Enrique Menendez and Mary Louise Menendez inside of the family room of the Menendez home that night.
Jill Lansing spoke next for the defense and said that Jose made it very clear he was going to harm Lyle and Eric if they ever told anyone about the abuse. And that's what led the brothers to purchase the guns using a fake ID and to ultimately shoot and kill their parents. The attorney said that both brothers waited until after their arrest and incarceration to talk about the abuse they suffered because of the overwhelming shame. A relative of the brothers had confirmed to Jill Lansing that as children, Lyle and Eric confided in her about the abuse. Jill Lansing told the jury in her opening statement that Lyle planned to take the witness stand and testify about the years of abuse he suffered at the hands of his father, Jose Menendez.
The children saw Jose Menendez as all-powerful. He flaunted the law. He bragged of his illegal acts. He told with glee of firing people and destroying careers. He reveled in his sadism. He talked to them about all he could do. He was the shepherd, and the rest were the sheep, a message that he passed on to his son and made him memorize. Witnesses will tell you of a young man who was shy, introverted, and sensitive. You will hear of what dinner was like at the Menendez home, what other people called Jeopardy dinners, where you were quizzed, and the price for not knowing the answer was to be made to feel stupid. If you didn't swim well enough, you were yelled at. You were held underwater. When you played tennis, you were drilled and drilled and drilled. And where other kids played for an hour, you played for 6. And when Dad wanted to teach you reflex drills, he hit the ball as hard as he could directly at you. So that Lyle Menendez walked away from many a reflex drill with a number of welts. What happens to this child who is supposed to be perfect when it turns out he has a speech impediment? He's ridiculed, he's laughed at, he starts a sentence and is humiliated and stops talking. He walks like a duck with his feet out, and his father quacks and tells him not to walk with him. It's too embarrassing. When at 14 he's still wetting the bed, his sheets appear on the breakfast room table. When he brings a rabbit home from school and his mother says, your father wants to have you get rid of it, and he doesn't do it for a few days, he comes home and asks his mother where the rabbit is. She says, ask your father. And his father tells him, go to the garbage. And there is the rabbit with its head smashed. Others who lived in that house knew that when Jose took off his belt, someone was going to get beaten. You didn't know who, and you didn't know why. And when Lyle had the nerve to go into a deli at about age 7 and buy some junk food, and his father looked in the bag, he didn't lecture him about health or rotten teeth. He just socked him in the stomach. And when in wrestling, Lyle grabbed him in his genitals, playing around during the time he was being molested, Jose took him and threw him into a table, a coffee table. And you will still see the scar on his eye. And we have a photograph, and we have medical records. Lyle also has a scar that runs down his lip to his chin. When he was about 16, he was out practicing tennis. And his father watched him and came and harassed him and pushed him in ways that his coach said he'd never seen done before. And when Lyle yelled at him to shut up, his father grabbed him, put him in the limousine, which was his father's usual means of transportation, grabbed him by the throat, and socked him square in the face, and said, if you ever embarrass me again, I will kill you.
Lester Kuriyama was the prosecutor assigned to Eric's case. During his opening arguments, Lester Kuriyama claimed that the brothers wanted to execute their parents and not get caught. He claimed that Lyle and Eric had killed their mother Kitty because she was a witness and would have been miserable and suicidal about Jose.
Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence will show in this case that Eric and Lyle Menendez conspired to murder their parents, Jose and Mary Menendez. They planned what Eric Menendez called the perfect murder. Pursuant to the plan, the defendants drove down to San Diego on August 18, 1989, and bought 2 Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns from a Big 5 sporting goods store using false identification. They committed the killings on a Sunday night, a night when the Menendez household maid, was not there. The defendants had a ready alibi when questioned by police. Eric Menendez told the police that he and his brother went to see Batman in Century City, and that they then went to Santa Monica to the Taste of LA. It was some kind of a wine tasting function. According to Eric Menendez, they just happened to come back home to pick up some false ID, some fake ID for a night on the town when they came upon the brutal slaying of their parents. The defendants were the ones to call 911 and report the killings initially to the police. The investigation into the murders of Mary and Jose Menendez was thus begun. The investigation revealed that Jose Menendez suffered a shotgun wound to the back of his head, as well as 4 other shotgun wounds. Mary Menendez suffered 10 shotgun wounds, including a contact wound to her left cheek. 2 shotgun blasts shattered panes in the French doors in the family room where the victims were killed. On August 24th, 1989, 4 days after the killings, Eric and Lyle Menendez went to Slavic Jewelers in Beverly Hills and purchased Rolex watches and money clips for some $15,000. The defendants thereafter collected $200,000 each on September 8, 1989, and another $125,000 each on September 15, 1989, in insurance proceeds from their father's life insurance policy. In addition to the defendant's alibi, the evidence will show that Eric Menendez tried to pin the crimes on others. On November 29, 1989, over 2 months after the slayings, and with the investigation ongoing, Eric Menendez claimed that hitmen were responsible for the murders. He also claimed that Castro might be involved in the murders because his father, Jose Menendez, wanted to liberate Cuba. Defendant Eric Menendez was secretly taped in a conversation that he had with Craig Signorelli at Gladstone's restaurant in Malibu over dinner on November 29, 1989. The defendant is heard to say, "I've known from the beginning. No clues, no one heard anything." The defendant then states his belief that Castro might have been involved in the killing of his parents. The defendant then says, "Man, we're talking about special hitmen, special shotguns, and knew exactly what they were doing in and out of the house. No one saw anything, no one heard anything. We're talking about serious hitmen." The evidence will show that the defendants nearly got away with their crimes. They had meticulously picked up all the shotgun shells from the family room. They had buried the shotguns, and they had indeed an alibi.
In her opening statement, Eric's defense attorney, Leslie Abramson, expanded on many of the same themes that Lyle's attorney, Jill Lansing, did during her opening arguments. She did agree that the timing of Eric's allegation of abuse was suspicious, but that didn't mean it wasn't true. According to Leslie Abramson, 1 week before the murders, Jose had told Eric he needed to commute to UCLA from their home in Beverly Hills, and Eric had been looking forward to dorming. To Eric, his father making him stay home meant that the essay would inevitably continue.
Jose and Mary Louise Menendez's efforts to isolate their children from the influence of any other adults was highly successful. Their son knew that no one ever stood up to them. He knew the power of his parents. He knew there were no adults who could rescue him. So for years he did the best he could, tried hard, won trophies for his parents, all the while struggling with thoughts of suicide and death and shame. Early in his adolescence, Eric Menendez's life improved slightly. His brother, who he idolized, became his friend. Jose Menendez had always compared Eric unfavorably to his older brother and had encouraged the boys to compete with and distrust each other. You will hear an expert's description of Jose Menendez's style of running his family as being classic divide and conquer. Make each member of the family think that his was the only approval worth gaining and that none had allies in each other. Lyle Menendez was a typical big brother. Sometimes he acted like a bully when Eric Menendez was small. But in early teenage, Eric's older brother started to defend him in small and subtle ways, the only ways Lyle Menendez dared in the face of his father's menace, defend him against the threat of Jose Menendez's physical and psychological attacks. Eric Menendez had always had few friends and fewer confidants. So his brother became, during that stage of his life and thereafter, the one person on earth it felt safe to love. 15-year-old Eric Menendez sustained himself with two thoughts. One, God may bring him a miracle. And the harshest part of his life, the sickening sex with Dad might end somehow. And two, and more realistic, someday he would go off to college and Dad wouldn't be able to come into his room anymore. God seemed to deliver on Eric Menendez's longed-for miracle when during the summer of 1986, shortly after they had purchased a brand new house in Princeton, New Jersey, Jose Menendez announced to his startled family that he had taken a job in California. Eric Menendez could not wait to leave the scene of so many humiliations and pain. And indeed, during the first 6 months in California, it really appeared that his prayers had been answered, because inexplicably, there was no sex with Dad during that time. But then again, something else became very apparent in California. There was trouble between his parents, and Mom was falling apart. Eric overheard conversations in which he learned that his mother had discovered that for 8 years, Dad had been having an affair, and Mary Louise Menendez was consumed by her own shock and suffering. Lyle Menendez had stayed behind in New Jersey to go to school when the rest of the family moved to California. Therefore, Eric Menendez was left alone much of the time with a mother who secreted herself in her bedroom and cried for weeks on end. Eventually, she started therapy, which continued until she died. But she never got better. She never got over the affair. She never got close to dealing with all the other problems of her family.
During the first phase of the trial, the prosecution called 26 witnesses, such as the clerk at the Big Five shop where the brothers purchased the shotguns, and the 2 computer experts who checked Kitty's computer for her updated will. The prosecution used these witnesses to highlight the key theme of their case, that Lyle and Eric were cold-blooded psychopaths. The prosecution at Lyle's trial played Lyle's 911 call to the Beverly Hills Police Department for the jurors. They wanted the jury to hear what a good actor Lyle could be when he wanted to. One of the responding officers to the Menendez family's Beverly Hills mansion that night testified that the 2 brothers ran around screaming, but the officers didn't see any true emotion from either Lyle or Eric after their parents' murder. The next witness for the prosecution was the captain of the boat on which the family went shark fishing on August 19th, the day before the murders. He described how Lyle and Eric sat huddled and away from the parents during the entire fishing trip. Leslie Abramson later told the media that Lyle and Eric sat away from everyone on the fishing trip because they believed it was a setup for their parents to kill them. One of the officers who came to the crime scene testified for the prosecution and said he became suspicious of the brothers after Eric told him he saw and smelled smoke in the home when he found his parents' bodies. The officer said that if Eric did smell and see smoke, it would have had to have been right after the shots were fired. So if you'll remember in an earlier episode when we talked about the burglaries that the brothers committed, one of their co-conspirators, Craig Signorelli, who was a best friend of Eric's, testified against him. Craig told the court how 12 days after Jose and Kitty were murdered, Eric described how it happened to him. The version of the story that Craig relayed to the jury differed greatly from the defense's stance that both brothers were in fear of their lives. Craig also told the court that Eric had never told him about abuse of any kind that he had experienced. Eric and Craig had written a screenplay called Friends, which was tried to be put into evidence by the prosecution, but ultimately was deemed inadmissible by the judge. The judge ruled that the script was written too long before the murders had been used. But in the script that Eric and Craig wrote together, It was about a teenager who murdered his parents for money and then attempted to cover up the crime.
The evidence will show that in January of 1988, Eric Menendez was involved in writing a screenplay in which the hero is...
Right, the objection is sustained at this point on that issue. Move on to something else, Mr. Freeland.
Your Honor, there has been a previous ruling on this.
Donovan Goodrow, whose name the brothers used to sign for the shotgun, testified that he left his wallet with his ID inside of Lyle's dorm room at Princeton when he was forced to leave because of stealing accusations. Donovan also told the court one time that he confided about sexual molestation that he'd experienced as a child, and Lyle never responded with any remarks or similar stories. Donovan's credibility proved not to be very reliable. The defense challenged his credibility, saying that in March 1992, Donovan had given an interview to a freelance writer in Miami in which he stated on tape that Lyle had told him Jose abused him in the past.
All right, state your name again for the record, please.
Donovan Goodrow.
Okay, Mr. Goodrow, you're still under oath.
Mr. Goodrow, yesterday afternoon, I think we left off by my asking you whether you remembered having a conversation with a journalist with regard to a dinner you had at a Chinese restaurant with Lyle. Do you remember my asking you those questions?
Yes, I do.
And I believe that your answer yesterday was that you did not recall. Is that correct?
Yes.
And were you telling the truth that you did not recall?
Yes, I was.
All right. I would like to show you a tape now to see if that refreshes your recollection.
He said that his father had been abusing Eric.
Yeah, him and Eric. And,
Lyle.
yeah, and, we take that. I just, man, you're at this, it's weird.
By his sworn courtroom testimony today, Goodrow told the story this way when questioned by Lyle's attorney, Jill Lansing.
That he and his brother had been molested by their father?
No, he didn't.
After hearing that in court and viewing the videotape of it, Rand had this reaction.
Donovan told me that Lyle complained to him the night of that dinner that Jose Menendez was using Eric and Lyle.
What does that mean?
It appears that he has perjured himself.
Donovan Goodrow is due back on the witness stand in the morning for more testimony.
Mr. Goodrow, now that you've seen that tape, does that refresh your recollection?
No, it doesn't.
So you still have no memory of that conversation with Mr. Rand?
No, I don't.
Are you saying that that conversation never took place?
No, it obviously took place. I just don't remember the conversation.
Do you recognize your voice?
Yes, I do.
That is your voice.
Yes, it is.
Medical examiner from the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office testified that Kitty's wounds occurred in quick succession. She had about 10 gunshot wounds, and Jose had 6. The prosecution's star witness was Dr. Oziel, the brother's psychiatrist. Because Lyle and Eric had threatened the doctor, all requirements of doctor-patient confidentiality went out the window. The defense believed that the doctor had created the tapes of Lyle and Eric's session for his own personal use, and that Lyle and Eric had only told Dr. Oziel what he wanted to hear.
I think that adults, children, adolescents, families, marriages, all sorts of people who are seeking counsel or help with emotional problems use clinical psychologists for those services.
And is it a basic tenet of the psychologist-patient relationship that what a person tells their psychologist is ordinarily private?
Ordinarily, what a patient tells a psychotherapist is private.
Is that yes?
I think I just said, ordinarily, it's private.
And in fact, isn't it a basic tenet of effective psychotherapy that the patient be confident that what they tell their psychologist is like what they tell their priest, confidential.
Objection, argumentative.
Sustain.
Is it a basic tenet of therapeutic treatment that patients be told that what they tell their psychologists are like what they tell their priest, confidential?
No, I wouldn't ever make the analogy that what patients tell their psychotherapist is the equivalent of what they tell their priest.
Well, isn't it an accepted notion in clinical psychology that unless a patient believes what they're saying is confidential, it's unlikely that they will be totally forthcoming or trusting of their therapist so as to share their pain and their problems?
Tell patients with exceptions, and in fact, that's not, the answer is no. I was not trained to tell people that what they told me was confidential in an absolute sense.
Dr. Oziel's credibility was also attacked before he even took the witness stand. The California State Board of Psychology filed a complaint against him that sought to revoke his medical license because he was allegedly engaged in a, quote, sexual, social, or business relationship with two of his patients. And ultimately, Dr. Oziel was stripped of his license in 1997.
Now, do you have a certification as a diplomate, as a board-certified sex therapist from the American Board of Sexology?
Yes, I do.
And are you a certified sex therapist from the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists?
Yes.
And are you a certified...
Believe so.
Excuse me?
Believe so. Meaning I believe all these are up to date and so on and so forth. I don't know when that vita was, and I don't recall whether some of these certificates are current or not. So I don't know what the document is that you're reading from. And,
at some point, did you have the certificates that I've just read?
That's correct.
And at some point, were you a certified sex educator from the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists?
That would be correct.
And at some point, were you a certified sexologist of the American College of Sexologists?
I believe so, yes.
And now, have I read to you all of the areas of which you are or were or believe you are or were certified?
I don't know. You're holding my vita, and I haven't probably looked at it for several years, so I don't recall.
So you need to see your vita to know what your specialties are?
No.
A woman named Louise contacted the prosecution and told them that she had been one of Jose's mistresses, and the man that she knew was nothing like the man the brothers were describing at their trial. The prosecution wanted to have Louise take the witness stand and testify for them, but ultimately decided against it, thinking the woman would undergo a brutal media assassination. The defense intended to call 90 witnesses, but the judge had them trim their list to only 50. The defense's case lasted for 3 months. They had the difficult task of trying to prove to the jury that the brothers were in fear for their lives and in imminent danger in order to get them a conviction of manslaughter down from the first-degree murder charge. Lyle testified over a 9-day period. His testimony was filled with stories about alleged abuse and molestation that he suffered at the hands of his father, starting around the age of 6. Both brothers were extremely emotional during Lyle's testimony. Lyle testified that at the age of 13, he came to believe that his father was touching Eric as well, based on sounds that he had overheard. He confronted Jose, but was under the impression that after this, the abuse had stopped, but unfortunately, it hadn't. Lyle said his father was controlling and his mother was emotionally unstable, so he sought comfort in his family of stuffed animals. Jose abused Lyle first since he was the older child. When Lyle was around 7, he also started taking Eric, who was 5 at the time, into the woods, and he would bring items that his father used on him, like toothbrushes, and he told the court that he played with Eric like my father played with me. And this was a really emotional time during this part of the trial, he turned to Eric and apologized. Lyle testified that his mother SA'd him when he was a preteen. He claimed that his mother Kitty touched him everywhere, even at times when his father was in bed with them. His attorney, Jill Lansing, asked Lyle why the brothers didn't run away from home since they were adults. Why did Lyle feel like he needed to kill his parents? Lyle replied that there was no use in doing that because Jose was powerful and would have found them and brought them home. Many were moved by Lyle's testimony. Both reporters and jurors alike could be seen wiping away tears. Even Dominic Dunn, who was known for saying he did it about most high-profile murder cases that he covered in Vanity Fair, he almost always sided with the prosecution, and even he, out in the courthouse hallway, said to Robert Rand, "I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I believe this. I think he's telling the truth."
She would put them in a special cage she had for birds that did that. And she was just amazing with the birds. I remember watching.
Did you love your mom and dad?
Yes.
And on August 20th, 1989, did you and your brother kill your mother and father?
Yes.
Did you kill them for money? Is that no?
No.
Did you kill them because you wanted to pay them back for the way they had treated you?
Excuse me, I reject that young lady.
Overruled. No.
Why did you kill your parents?
Because we were afraid.
And once you moved to Muncie, did sports become an important part of your life?
Well, they were everything to my dad, and that was my whole life at that time.
And was doing what your father wanted of you important?
That's what made him happy, and that's what I wanted to do.
Why did you want to make him happy?
So he would love me.
And what was it like when it was bad?
Well, I didn't really like the swimming. And sometimes he was rough with the swimming.
What do you mean he was rough with the swimming?
I'm sorry? Overruled. You may ask your question.
It was like they were just drills, and I would swim laps, and sometimes he would just yank me out of the water by my hair, and he would shake you, and he took it very, very seriously. He was training to be an Olympic swimmer at one point, and so he had all kinds of different methods and how to expand your lungs and how long I should be able to hold my breath. And we practiced him holding me under the water, how long I could take it.
What do you mean how long you could take it? Would he say, I'm going to hold you under for 30 seconds and then you go under, or what would that be like?
We would go under, and I would fight him to get air, and then he would give me air. And we would keep doing that, and I would be able to do it less and less time. And it was very rough. And
what do you mean you would fight him to get air?
I would just push away from him or pinch him or do whatever I could, hit him underwater. My dad was unaffected by all that, so that's what he wanted me to do. He wanted me to fight to get air so that I could go beyond what I would normally just take if he said stay underwater as long as you could. And this would expand my lungs.
And do you have any other memories of swimming that are painful for you?
The whole thing was very bad for me. And mostly I remember pleading with my mother not to take me, stalling so I would be late, incredible stomach aches, I think from nerves, where I would be nauseous and I would vomit.
What would your mom say when you'd ask her to not make you go?
She would just say, "Get ready, let's go." And she would always threaten me with telling my dad. But when it came to the swimming, I was pretty resistant. I didn't seem to care as much as I did normally. I was pretty crazed about the swimming. It made me so nauseous and nervous. The drilling, the intensity, the underwater stuff was very hard for me. I remember purposely swimming into the wall in practice so that I would be injured, so that the coach would say, "Okay, you can sit in the locker room and miss the afternoon sessions." And I would do all kinds of things anything to get out of it.
Was there any particular reason that swimming was so important? You said your father had trained.
Well, my grandmother, I had heard, was a champion swimmer. Even my dad's sisters, who were less into sports, were very good swimmers. And he was training to be an Olympic swimmer at the time that he had to leave Cuba. And he felt he could have gone all the way. And at least in the beginning, he felt that I could. And then that just clearly wasn't going to be. They basically just let my dad do what he wanted to do. And,
Did you get to be friends with the other kids on the team?
no, not really.
Why not?
I just didn't spend any time with them, and my dad didn't want that.
Why not?
It's just part of his philosophy. If I started becoming friendly with these other players, I wouldn't be competitive. At the Lawrenceville Deli, we stopped there routinely on the way from or to the soccer fields from where our house was in Pennington. And my dad would be buying the things he felt he wanted for me, and the guy behind the counter was very friendly. They'd had the place forever, and he knew me every time I came in my soccer clothes. Basically, he sneaked me in a bag some pastries and cookies and stuff. He just sort of put it in with everything else my dad was buying, and I took it out when my dad wasn't looking.
Did your dad find him?
He found them on me outside the store.
Were you eating them?
I was eating them. Yes.
And what did your dad do?
He just grabbed them out of my hand, and he just grabbed me by the neck, and he just punched me in the stomach.
Did he say anything?
No, he dragged me to the car, and I don't believe that he said anything. And I knew what was obvious.
Do you ever take photographs of you and your brother?
Yes.
And what would the circumstances be in which he would take photographs?
He would take photographs of us, our private parts.
And would he have you come in and pose for these photographs, or how would that happen?
I would just, if we were in the showers or bathtub or changing, he would just use the same camera that my mother used, and then he would come in and take just a photograph or two, and he wouldn't say anything, and then he would leave.
Do you ever show you those photos?
No.
Excuse me. What types of situations would he talk to you about?
He would talk about the bonding between men, going into battle or in competitions, mostly with regards to battle and history, interaction and touching and hugging, but also was throughout history was something that men that had gone into battle had done together. Had me read passages about it.
What do you mean, had you read passages about it? What would he give you to read?
Excuse me, Your Honor, can we have a time period, please?
Yes.
What time are we talking about in your life?
Talking about when I was 6.
What would he have you read?
He had history books with passages outlined, various battles and strategy, but in terms of on this subject, there would be particular passages about Greeks, soldiers having had sex with each other before they went into battle as a way of bonding with each other, so they have a stronger connection. And he would talk about the same thing with regards to sports, and he and I.
And did he talk about fathers and their firstborn sons in this regard?
Not in this. Not that that's what. I'm not understanding the question.
Did he talk about, you said he talked about soldiers and having sex between them as a bonding mechanism.
Yes.
Did he talk about teachers and students?
No.
Did he?
Oh, yes, he did actually. Not teachers. He talked to me about, I don't know, they were like lecturers or traveling lecturers, professors, and they would have arrangements with very close special students, young boys. And they would teach each other.
And did he talk about it with regard to fathers and sons?
He talked about it with regard to our relationship as being very special, and our family history with the firstborn and the father.
And what was special about the relationship of the firstborn and the father?
That it was special, and that that was really all that mattered, was the firstborn, and that the sons should do what the fathers say, and then they grow up and they become like the father, and the father teaches them and molds them, and someday me and my son do the same.
And between the ages of 6 and 8, did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
And how did it start?
Just started with, after sports practices, he would me, and we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would, and we would undress.
Where would this
and it
take
was
place?
In my bedroom.
And how often would this happen?
Like 2 or 3 times a week.
And for how long did this happen?
Not too long. It began to change.
When did it begin to change?
I'm not sure exactly at what time, but almost close to when I was 7.
And how did it change?
Just became more involved.
What do you mean more involved?
We would be in the bathroom, and he would put me on my and me all my movements, and I would have oral sex with him.
Did you want to do this? At some point, did he do some other things to you?
Yes.
What else did he do to you?
He used objects.
What kind of objects?
A toothbrush and some sort of shaving utensil brush. He.
Did you cry?
Yes.
Did you bleed?
Yes.
Were you scared?
Very.
Did you ask him not to?
Yes.
How did you ask him not to?
I just told him, I don't. I'm sorry. I just told him that I didn't want to do this, and that it hurt me. And he said that he didn't mean to hurt me, and he loved me.
Was that important to you, that he loved you?
Yes, very. But I still didn't want to do it.
Did you tell your mom?
Yes.
What did you say to your mom?
I told her to tell Dad to leave me alone. And he keeps touching me.
What did your mom say?
She told me to stop it. And that I was exaggerating. And that my dad has to punish me when I do things wrong. And she told me that he loved me.
Did you ever tell anybody else?
When?
Did you ever tell anybody else when you were a child? You heard Diane Vandermolen testify. Do you
Yes.
remember telling her?
No.
Did you complain to your cousin Alan?
No, not about that.
Just about punishment. As a child, did you ever tell anybody else what had happened with your dad?
Yes. As a child, no.
Why not?
I was afraid, and my dad didn't want me to.
What did he tell you about telling people?
He just said that it was our secret, that bad things would happen to me if I told anybody. And I told him I never would.
How old were you when this stopped?
8.
So during the time between 6 and 8, when this was going on, did you tell your brother?
No.
Did you do something to your brother?
Yes.
What did you do to your brother?
I took him out to the woods whenever I felt, I don't know, I took him out sometimes, and I took a toothbrush also, and I with Eric in the same way. And I'm sorry.
It stopped for you with your dad when you were 8. When you were about 13, did you think that it might be happening to someone else?
Yes.
And who did you think it was happening to?
Eric.
And did you do something about it?
Yes.
What did you do?
I talked to my dad.
What did you say to your dad?
I told him that I knew what was going on with him and Eric, and I heard noises, and that I wanted him to leave Eric alone.
And what did he say to you?
He told me that Eric was, that Eric made things up sometimes, but that it would stop, and that we should keep it just between us, or he'd kill me.
Did you ever tell anybody what you thought was going on?
No, I told him I would never tell anybody. I just wanted to stop.
Did he tell you it would stop?
He did.